Welcome to the final Menagerie tier list. It is just the cards this time. There are 30 cards in Menagerie, so it's going to be a big one. But there's not a lot of bad cards. So let's get started with, well, one of the only cards I think I'd consider bad in this set, and that's Gatekeeper. Yeah, Gatekeeper is probably one of the maybe least well thought out cards in Dominion, or I don't know, just one of the most ineffectual. It seems like it should be pretty cool. It makes your opponent have to exile stuff that they buy if they don't have a copy of it in exile. So in theory, it keeps them from getting stuff. In practice, it's a little bit too slow to be effective, and it's often easily countered simply by buying another copy of the card, and it only causes a slight delay. Yeah, like it just generally speaking, it barely does anything. Like it's not terrible to add as an attack when you've already got a working engine going, but it really doesn't add a whole lot. It's kind of like you're already winning, so you just add something to rub salt in the wound, and it doesn't rub that much salt. The bonus effect is +3 coin for your next turn, which is better than the attack, probably. Yeah, because +3 coin is all right, but I don't know. Like at a cost of 5, generally you're going to want to go for something else other than Gatekeeper. I think it's D tier, and probably the only D tier card in the set. Right next is Kiln, and I'm going to put that up in the C tier. Kiln allows you to gain a copy of the next card you play, whether it be action, treasure, knight, whatever. Which I'm not sure if knight works. I'm too lazy to check. But whatever, it lets you gain a copy of the next card. And if you gain an action card, this is really good. But of course, that requires that you have villages of some kind to use with Kiln. It's often a little bit awkward to set off. But of course, if you've got good treasures that you want to gain extra copies of, then Kiln is extra nice. But generally speaking, it's a little bit slow and awkward to get into play. And it really can only get you one card. Like there's no way to make it gain you more, so it's a little bit limited in that respect, so maybe a little disappointing. Still, it's an all right card. It's an option to have available that sometimes pays off for you, but I think like most of the time you can safely ignore Kiln. Next up is Cardinal, and we're actually just going to go ahead and jump up to the B tier here. Yeah, Cardinal can be a surprisingly effective attack, kind of mid to late game. I think early game it's often very swingy. Like it can suck if you lose that card that you opened early in the game or something, but it statistically is not very likely to happen. And you can just kind of chalk it up to bad luck. Mid game, it's pretty nice because it can stop your opponent from getting key cards at random. Late game, it tends to not be very good. In fact, one strategy I saw recently is someone started buying duchies against me when I was playing Cardinal, and they were able to exile those as a defense. And I thought that was really creative. So yeah, there are ways to get around Cardinal. You can go heavy on silver or something. I don't know, just to kind of pad your deck out with stuff. Or you could just ignore the card because a lot of the times it just isn't doing as much as you think. Yeah, it's just making your opponent exile stuff, and well, that's not that bad. The only time it really, really hurts is when a pile empties, and then Cardinal is putting it away forever, essentially. But then, I mean, there are trashing attacks that can do worse than that, right? So yeah, I mean, Cardinal is just pretty good. I think like there are those games where it's amazing, or like near amazing, but then there are a whole lot of games where it's just okay. At least it gives you some coin, if nothing else. So yeah, it's all right. I put it in the B tier. It can be very important, but often it's not really that important. Next in the B tier is going to be this card, Camel Train. Sometimes I forget what it's called. Camel Train is a 3-cost card, which is one of the nice things about it. When bought, it exiles gold, which you can later pick up later by buying gold. So that's pretty nice. But the more important thing is that it lets you exile actions from the trash when you play it. I'm going to just check, make sure I'm right about that. Is it exile a non-victory card? Okay, it's actually actions and treasures. Sometimes I forget it can exile treasures. So yeah, you can also exile more golds, or you can exile special treasures. But, it's just basically anything except victory from the supply. And you can pick them up en masse later. Now, the thing about this card is I feel like people often get it too early, and you probably want to get it more like after the first shuffle or something like that. Not too late in the game, though. It can kind of do the thing Lurker does, where you just empty piles without any intent of gaining the cards. But It could also just be used to win splits in your favor. I don't think it's amazing at this, but the fact is it's low cost and it can help you win a split. So it is by default kind of pretty good. Now, I personally probably would have ranked Cardinal above this, but I'm going to have to go by what Thunder Dominion did just for the sake of these lists. So I think this is one of the places where I disagree. But I think it's a decent enough card. I could see C tier. Like my gut says it's more of a C tier card, but I'm not comfortable putting Cardinal in C tier because I feel like Cardinal is pretty important in a lot of the kingdoms that it's in. Yeah, so I'm still kind of wrapping my head around Camel Train regardless, but yeah, I think it's decent. And, B tier, I'm not going to cry about it being there. So the next card, I'm not seeing it. Is it under my head? No. Oh boy. Black Cat. See, the problem is it's an animal. Yeah, there we go. There we go. So I keep thinking it's one of the ways. But no, yeah. Black Cat is a B tier card. +2 draw, which is, of course, nice. But Black Cat does this thing where if your opponent buys a victory card, they gain a curse and you play it. And you can chain Black Cats together and make your opponent gain lots of curses just for buying a victory card. It's pretty nasty. But the best thing about it, of course, is actually that it's drawing cards on your opponent's turn. So just as a comparison, there's the Landmark that does the same thing, which I forget the name of because I never buy it. Well, Black Cat's a lot better because it's cheaper and it gives you a tangible effect on your turns, which is draw. And that's nothing to sneeze at, okay? But yeah, of course, it's a cursor as well, so it is giving them a little point reduction and punishing them for greening. So yeah, it's pretty strong. It kind of controls the pace of the game in the late game, prevents people from greening too early, or in some cases, greening at all. Yeah, decently strong, but I think it's variable enough that I don't put it above the B tier. I think there's a lot of games where it's just okay, or it doesn't even really do anything at all. So B tier. The next card is Slay. And Slay, I think, is quite a bit underrated a lot of the time. It only costs 2. When you play it, it gains 2 horses. Getting 2 horses is a very, very good effect. Of course, Slay does other stuff as well. It's like super complicated, right? So when you gain a card, you can discard it in order to put the card onto your hand or into your hand or onto your deck. Yeah, there's a lot of options that it gives you. And I don't use all of them all that frequently, and I don't want to sit here naming cases where you can use it, but suffice to say, there are definitely cases where you can use the Slay. Even if you just have 2 Slays and you top deck a horse you gained with 1, that's all right. You can use it next turn. The fact is, Slay is cheap, and it is a viable draw option, especially if you have thinning, and you can play the Slay very frequently. So yeah, it's pretty good overall. I wouldn't say it's amazing, but fits into a lot of decks better than you think it's going to. And you're also going to use those reaction effects more often than you're probably expecting, which is often the case with top decking cards. Animal Fair is the next card in B tier. So Animal Fair just gives you +4 coins on play, but if piles are out, it gives you an extra buy for each pile. It's a whole lot better when piles are out. One of the significant things about this card is the way you gain it. You could pay 7 coin for it, but that's a lot. The other way to get it is to trash an action from your hand and gain a copy of Animal Fair instead. And this is relevant in a lot of ways. One, of course, you can get it early in the game this way by trashing a Necropolis or some other cheap action that you've purchased. But the other nice thing about it is late game, you can just pile out the Animal Fair by trashing cards from your hand at 0 cost other than a buy. So that's pretty strong. It's something to look out for. Also, the Animal Fair itself costs 7 coin, which makes it a great candidate for trash for benefit cards. Maybe if you invested in it, you don't want to do that, but there's certainly cases where you'd like to apprentice a Animal Fair instead of playing it for money. I'll just say that much. But yeah, you can also upgrade them for provinces and stuff like that. And it's a more compelling target than King's Court, I suppose. But yeah, all in all, it's pretty good economy. It's kind of like a fully powered trade route, so that's nice. Not that trade route is amazing, but it's pretty cool that you can get what's basically better than the max effect of trade route for not even trashing anything. Yeah, it's pretty strong, but it's not amazing. I think B tier is good enough. I would personally put it below Sleigh, and maybe below Black Cat as well. I'm not sure. I think it is pretty good though, and it's about a similar power level. Sheepdog, I agree, is slightly better though. Basically, when you gain a card, you draw 2 cards, which means that if your opponent junks you, you can draw with Sheepdog that turn. Or if you gain a card mid-turn, you can play Sheepdog mid-turn at no action cost. That is pretty strong, but of course it has to be in hand. Now, of course, this needs a deck that can use Sheepdog mid-turn for it to be very, very effective, but those decks definitely exist, and Sheepdog is very effective in them, especially since it costs 3, so you can load up on them pretty quickly. But yeah, if you don't have a combo, it's just okay. It's just a +2 draw card. Not amazing. It doesn't curse your opponent like Black Cat or anything like that, but it's still overall pretty strong. There are enough combos that Sheepdog is explosive relatively often. It's also just incredibly cute, right? Don't you just want to click on it, looking at it? There you go. Great card there. Next in the B tier is Coven. Coven is a cursing attack, but it exiles the curses. And once the curse pile is empty, if you play a Coven, all the curses get dumped into their deck. So it's kind of like a time bomb. Now, there's some interesting kind of meta play with Coven. You can opt not to buy Covens and make your opponent do all of the cursing. And if their deck is not moving very quickly, this is very good because they'll be wasting their time playing this card for a coin that doesn't draw them anything, and you'll just be going along your merry way. But it can also backfire, if you do end up with the 10 curses in your deck and no way to deal with them. And a lot of the times I do think Coven is pretty slow and can be played around, but there are certainly times where the game is going to go long enough that Coven will pay off, and you have to be aware of that. It also does give -1 victory points if you don't deal with that curse, so that's something to keep in mind. And there have been a couple of times when I left the curses on my opponent's exile mat and just never dumped them into their deck. You can do that. It prevents them from getting the points back, at least. But I'm going to say that's pretty rare. Most of the time, you want them to get the curses more to fill out their deck than to have anything to do with the points. It does give 2 coin, and it's non-terminal, so that's not horrible. I think it's just all around kind of an average card. I think people see it and they're scared of it because it's an attack, but I think most of the time it's just okay. It can be pretty strong if you can very quickly gain them and play them fast, but I think a lot of the time it's just average. It's not as good as Witch, right, where you can draw while you're playing the card. But yeah, it's pretty good. It's pretty all right. I used to think it was much worse than this, but yeah, I think B tier is nice, right in the middle there. So if you didn't know, Menagerie is a pretty powerful expansion. Let's start the A tier with Snowy Village. Snowy Village, one of the coolest things about it is it only costs 3. It gives you +4 actions. And also a buy, which I often forget is there, but that buy is pretty important because it means that this is more than just like a superpowered village with a cost. Of course, the cost being every action you play after it uses an action no matter what, right? So, well, that's, that's hurtful. But on the other hand, you get +4 actions, which is great, okay? If you play this at the right time. You want to play it late into your action chain relative to most villages. But still, like at the low cost for entry and with the buy on top of everything, this is just very, very good. You probably don't want more than one unless you're desperate for that buy. But yeah, you're going to probably buy Snowy Village most of the time it's on the board because it's just that good. Yeah, just use sparingly. And I don't really know what else to say about it. It's very strong. Next is Falconer, which I could see being lower than this, but I don't know. Like, I'm not a wizard with this card, I have to admit. In fact, I always have to read what it does again. So, yeah, it lets you gain a card into your hand that costs less than Falconer, which is basically 4 cost cards. And then the other thing it does is the reaction is if your opponent gets a card, with 2 types or more, you can play Falconer immediately then. And that's pretty strong. Playing any card on your opponent's turn is usually at least decent. It doesn't use an action when you do it that way. So that's kind of what's cool about it. And you got to remember, you can do it on your turn as well. You can gain a a card with 2 or more types, because it says when any player gains a card with 2 or more types. So yeah, like there's ways to make yourself do this without using up your action, and in those cases, Falconer is going to be very powerful. Um, yeah, and even if Falconer's the only one on the board that does that, well, it's something. And you shouldn't be afraid to gain even something like silver with this. Gaining a silver to hand is not terrible. That's +2 coin. And if your deck is thin, like you're trashing, gaining silver mid to late game is not a terrible thing, because you're adding economy to your deck that you can use later on. Like silver is only really bad when you're bloating your deck with it, I think. So yeah, Falconer is a nice way to kind of build up your deck, as long as your opponent's able to activate it for you. It's kind of contextual. And with that in mind, I actually kind of think it's worse than Snowy Village, but who am I to argue with the Thunder Dominion team here? Yeah, I think it is definitely a very good card, though, especially on the boards where it is powerful. It really stands out. So yeah, I can see it being an A tier, even if I'm not 100% sure myself. Gain and play, of course, very good. The next card is Goat Herd, which I think a lot of people were unimpressed when the set came out. But, I mean, at the end of the day, it's a non-terminal trasher, right? You trash a card from your hand, and it only costs 3, so you can open with 2 if you want. Now, the downside to Goat Herd is to get its bonus, your opponent has to trash cards on their turn. The more cards they trash, the more you draw with Goat Herd. So it can be a very powerful drawer, or it can not draw at all. It all depends on what your opponent does. And it's a little unfortunate that you're relying on your opponent, but usually trashing is so good that they're going to be trying to do it. So you're probably going to get the Goat Herd bonus, especially if they have their own Goat Herd. And at the end of the day, it's just something you have to do, right? You need to thin those cards. You need to go for the Goat Herd, even if it's risky. And yeah, so there you go. Like Forager. Forager's not always amazing, but you still get it because it's a non-terminal trasher. And yeah, that makes it relatively fast. But yeah, if you get the benefit, it can potentially be better than Forager, drawing those cards. So yeah, it's certainly A tier. It's not the best card in the set or anything, but it's very good. Fisherman, of course, also here. It's a 5-cost card. It's just a peddler. But the cool thing about it is if you don't have any cards in your discard, then Fisherman only costs 2. And yeah, that's really sweet. There's special ways you can open with it. You can also gain it early in your buy phase and then buy something else as a bonus. Yeah, overall, it's really nice. There's not a whole lot to say about it, though. It's good with Trash for Benefit, kind of like Animal Fare. At the end of the day, just another peddler variant. Decently strong. I think people overrate it a little bit, but I agree. A tier. It's strong. Livery. Maybe the most initially overrated card in Menagerie, but it's definitely still very good. It's A tier. So you get 3 coin on playing it. It only costs 5, so that's decent economy. But if you buy a card that costs 4 or more, you gain a horse. And it doesn't even have to be buying, it can be gaining as well. So the ceiling for Livery is very, very high. If you can gain lots of cards in your turn, you can gain lots of horses. But on the other hand, if you're gaining cheap cards, then Livery unfortunately doesn't give you a bonus. So you got to be buying stuff that costs 4 or more. A little bit unfortunate for it. And I think that's the reason it's kind of dropped off so much. It's like there are a lot of times you just need to buy cheaper stuff. And yeah, you can't really make use of Livery there. Now you can stack liveries by playing more than one of them, and you can get multiple horses for buying stuff, and then it's really good. But it is a terminal action, and it doesn't draw for itself, so that can come with some risks there. Still, I think it's powerful enough that this is definitely A tier. Like there are those boards where Livery goes completely crazy. Like Populate down here is an awesome combo with Livery, and there are others as well, obviously. So yeah, I mean, you could never say it's a bad card, but there are often times when you can skip it, I think. Still, really good. And at worst, I mean, it gives you +3 coins, right? And that's pretty good. That's like a gold. So, yeah, decent card there. Next is going to be Displace. It's a remodel on crack. Yeah, it's pretty strong. 5-cost card. Lets you exile a card instead of trashing it, and then gain something else that costs up to 2 more. Now, it's unfortunate it's gained something else, so you can't mill provinces for provinces, but you can put away a province and get something more useful For instance, like turning a province into a gold, but saving your 6 points. And of course, you can do any of the classic remodel tricks like turning gold into province. That's always there. You can also gain back the card that you displaced that turn, which is awesome. Yeah, overall, it's just a very versatile remodel variant, and it's certainly better than remodel. So yeah, like it fits into most decks, I think, especially late game. But you can use it a lot mid game. It's very flexible. I'm not sure what else to say about it. It's really, really strong, but not quite S tier. Next is Hunting Lodge. Hunting Lodge, of course, seems ridiculous at first, and it is pretty darn good. It's basically like a self-minion village. Basically, you have the option of either keeping your hand or dumping it and drawing 4 cards after playing it. And it's a village. Yeah, that's very good. It's very good. It's draw to X kind of in a weird way. And if you've got cards that make your hand disappear, then this is a very strong combo. The drawback is because it draws first before you dump your hand, sometimes you'll draw a card you need to play right then, and then you can't dump your hand. So that's a bit unfortunate. You need to have lots of Hunting Lodges to make it really, really good. But it's not really a huge drawback since you want more villages anyway. So, yeah, I don't know. It's not a huge knock. I just don't think it's nearly as beastly as we might have originally thought it was. Still a very strong card and very fun to play with as well. I really enjoy Hunting Lodge. One of my favorite cards in this set. Next is Paddock. Well, everyone was so focused on livery, they didn't see Paddock coming. I'm awfully tempted to put this in S tier, but I think maybe I overrate it. So yeah, Paddock, 2 coins, gain 2 horses. I've already talked about with Slay, gaining 2 horses is very good. 2 coins on top of it is even better. But even better than that is when there are empty piles, you can play this non-terminally. Or if there's 2 empty piles, it's a village on top of everything else. Yeah, Paddock is nuts. All right, this is like a completely viable as your only source of draw in the game, just because you can get so many horses and not even care, especially once a pile is out. Yeah, overall, yeah, Paddock's really strong. The only problem is it's slow to get it to where it's amazing. But honestly, even if you just get +1 action from it, it's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing. And if it didn't have like this awkward period where it's a terminal silver, it would be S tier for sure, I think. Still, but it does have that. You can totally rely on Paddock for draw. If you've been sleeping on it, you need to wake up because it's very, very good. Now, I don't agree with this one being here, but again, I'm beholden to the Thunder Dominion rating team. That's Scrap here in the A tier. It's a trasher. You can kind of make it non-terminal by taking action as one of your options. To be fair, like gaining horses is a pretty good effect for on-trash benefit, among other things. It's nice to trash silvers and just kind of quickly do stuff that you need to do with this card, but yeah, and the buy is pretty significant late game. Sorry if I'm like blowing through what this thing does. It's got too many cards. Go read it yourself if you don't know. But I don't know. I just have found it kind of underwhelming. But it's here in A tier. It is a cheap trasher, and again, like the horses are a pretty good effect to get out of thinning. Unfortunately, Scrap is very bad at trashing 0-cost cards. It's like one of the worst, I think, at doing this, just because it's a terminal action that will do nothing in that case. But, for estates, it's okay. The best thing you can do with it, though, is to trash slightly more expensive stuff like silver, I don't know, rats, stuff like that. And, yeah, then Scrap is pretty good. But I've never personally found it to be overwhelmingly good. I think it's just all right. So I'm a little confused as to why it's ranked this high. But maybe there's just something I don't understand. And that's okay. I don't need to understand every card at a super high level. But obviously, sometimes you just need the card for thinning, and sometimes it's the only buy. But I think maybe it's a little overrated, if I'm being honest. So that's where they ranked it. I'm going to leave it here. I'm not going to put it any higher. But you know what I am going to put higher is Supplies. Supplies is very good. 2-cost card. When you play it, it's treasure. When you play it, you get 1 coin and put a horse on your deck. Obviously, the 1 coin, not amazing, but the horse, very, very good. You can rely on supplies for your draw. There's nothing wrong with that because horses are just that good. And at least you get something out of it. Get that coin there. I see people call it a peddler variant, which I think is just people really stretching the definition of peddler. It gains you a horse. Okay, it's not a peddler. It's different. Yeah. But still, they're very cheap at only 2 costs. Pretty easy to load up on, especially like mid-game with extra buys and stuff. Get a lot of them. Decent opening card. Usually going to be better than silver. Overall, very strong. I almost always get this card when it's on the board. And I'm perfectly fine with it being ranked here. I'm being careful about this one because I keep getting it mixed up with another one. But next up in the A tier is Hostelry. And yeah, Hostelry is very good. It's 4-cost village. But when gained, you can discard as many treasures as you want and gain a horse for each one. And to say that this is a good on-game benefit is underselling it. That's very, very strong. You can use the horses right away, or you can save them for later. Either way, this is a very, very strong card. I personally prefer to save the horses if I can. But yeah, what? It's a village that you gain horses in the middle of your turn for, right? What's to say there? It's pretty darn good. Pretty darn good. One drawback of it is eventually the hostelries run out, and then you can't get any more horses. But honestly, by then the game should be close to ending. So yeah, it's strong. Next is Barge. Barge is ultimately pretty simple. It's like Wharf, a little weaker, but it's good. You can play it this turn, get 3 cards and a buy. Very strong. Or you can save it for next turn and start your hand with 3 cards and a buy, which is very, very good. Yeah, I mean, both of those effects are great. Both of those effects are great. I like to get like 4 or more of them when I can. But, you know, it's not really broken. And having the choice and having to pick between them does make it significantly worse than Wharf. So, yeah, overall, strong draw card. Plus buy is nothing to sneeze at. I think leaving it in the A tier is good enough. Let's start the S tier. Mastermind will be the first one there. Mastermind, of course, is like King's Court, but it's delayed. You know, you play a dead card this turn. Next turn, you triple the first action you play. You can triple Mastermind and keep delaying them and build up a big King's Court type chain. At only 5 costs, this is a really, really good effect. Of course, I probably don't need to tell you how strong tripling a card is. Even if it's something simple like a smithy or a village, I mean, those are really, really good cards to be tripling. And, you know, there's some actions it doesn't work very well with, but for the vast majority of actions, you're very happy to be tripling them. Yeah, and it's versatile, to say the least. So yeah, it belongs in the S tier, I think. So does Wayfarer. Wayfarer, pretty interesting draw card. 3 cards, you get the option of gaining a silver. And as I've said before with other cards, cards that let you start building your economy up mid to late game are pretty good. You know, early on you want to thin, but then you do want to start getting some coin for your cards to draw. And Wayfarer lets you do that. Wayfarer can also be bought for cheaper than 6 coins if you gain cards prior to it, including gaining the silver with Wayfarer. So it's very easy to load up on them and build a crazy draw engine. I haven't really scratched the surface of this card in my own play. Like, I think it's probably even better than I think it is, maybe. But yeah, I would say overall it's very strong and kind of brain dead in a way because you can just kind of spam them and get in those silvers, right? Yeah, but it's also not brain dead because you can get it for real cheap and it's strategic enough to get. And the cost reduction does mean you can burn the pile late in the game if you know what you're doing. So yeah, there's a lot to this card. I think it's kind of a surprising S tier, maybe. The first time you see it, you wouldn't think it's that amazing, but I think it really is. And I'm going to put it here. Destrier, this is a really quick one. I think maybe it's not really S tier, but whatever, it's good. Basically, the more cards you gain in your turn, the lower the price of this thing. You can even buy coppers to shave off some of the price for it. So it's a very easy lab to load up on, and that's about all there is to it. The split is possible to win early if you can reduce prices enough by buying lots of cards. But you can also just buy it as if it were a lab. It only costs 1 more than lab at base, right? But every card you gain makes it significantly cheaper. So yeah, I mean, labs are good. This is a very good lab variant. Not much else to say about it. You're probably going to want to get them when you can. Even if all it does is draw, well, that's still draw. So that's pretty strong. Next up is Village Green. Very strong village. Of course, you can just play it as a village. It only costs 4. But ideally, you're going to be wanting to use its reaction effect, which I'm just going to read because I forget like all the nuance to it a lot of the time. So it's a reaction card. And when it gets discarded, other than during cleanup, you can play it. So it's like Tunnel, right? And there are lots of ways that you can make this happen, or it can get triggered by an opponent doing something. And you basically just want to play it. Now, when you play it, you have the option of either playing it now or at the start of your next turn, which makes it incredibly flexible. And as usual with durations, the next turn effect is quite a bit more powerful, but either one of them is pretty darn good. Yeah, so it's an extremely versatile village. They're not expensive. It only costs 4. The duration effect is very useful. The delay effect is very useful. Not too much to say here. It's just an incredibly good card that you should probably be pounding the pile down on when it's in the game. Yeah, one of the best villages in the game, for sure. Next is going to be Sanctuary, which I think maybe is a little overrated, but yeah, it's still good. So 5-cost card. It's a cantrip, gives you a buy, which is very nice, and it lets you exile a card from your hand. I forget if it's you may or is it optional or mandatory? I forget. You may, yeah. If it was mandatory, that would suck, but well, it'd still be pretty good. But yeah, you can exile a card from your hand. Now, since it's a plus buy, this is actually very nice. It means you can actually use the Sanctuary on victory cards that you start getting mid to late game and start putting them away. So it gives you some thinning without losing points, which is great. Of course, it can also be used early in the game as well. Yeah, and overall, that's just strong. It's for tucking away victory cards. It's way better than, say, Island, because you're getting that plus buy out of it. Overall, it's very, I think, low opportunity cost, and that's the reason it's ranked this high. It's hard not to smile when you play a Sanctuary. They're very good, and of course you can get more than one to make use of that buy, making it not just a card for tucking away victory cards. And there you go. Very strong card. Next is Bounty Hunter. So I talked about this because I kind of disagreed with the final bits of the Thunder Dominion rankings here, and a lot of people said they think Bounty Hunter is actually the best card in the set, and I can see why they think that. Basically, you can exile a card from your hand, and if you do this, if you didn't have a copy of it in exile, you get +3 coins. And this is non-terminal. So, yeah, it's like a 4-cost gold that exiles something. That's really strong. That's really strong. Of course, it has to be something you haven't exiled, so you can't just keep exiling copper. But there are a lot of cards that you don't mind exiling and then gaining back. A great example of this is Horse. There are lots of cards that gain you horses, so you exile a horse, and then you gain another one back. But there are other cards you can do this with as well. For instance, late in the game, when you start greening, you can exile a province to get that +3 coin. But even if you're not getting the money from Bounty Hunter, it's still a trasher that's non-terminal at the end of the day. So it's still very useful. And those couple of early turns, when you thin out your copper and estate, Bounty Hunter is great. Bounty Hunter is absolutely awesome. It's like better than Moneylender. Great for those few turns. Yeah, it remains good. There are combos you can do with it, but it's just so powerful early and late game that I think it totally does deserve to be in the S tier. Where it goes in the S tier, I think, kind of depends on you, but yeah, it certainly belongs here. Next is Stockpile, which I think also has a case for being the best card in the set. It's +3 coin, +1 buy treasure for only 3 coins, but you have to exile it when you play it, which means it's one shot. But you can get them all back, because if you buy another Stockpile, you drop them all from exile. So you can just keep playing this incredibly good treasure card. It's one of the cards I think that most commonly gets bought out in games just because that's such a good thing. Now, it's economy that doesn't last for the entire game, but that doesn't really matter because the game is going to push toward the end really, really fast when Stockpile is in the kingdom. Yeah, and overall, you don't want to underestimate just how good this thing is. You should definitely be considering opening it almost all the time. And it's pretty good economy throughout most of the game as well. So here we are at the final 2. Which one do you think is number one? I don't know, but here's what they put. Cavalry is the number 2 card in the set. Now, my opinion, it's number 1. All right, I'm just going to throw that out there. But the voters decided on Groom, and that's where we are. Cavalry is completely ridiculous, just like Villa before it. Just a really good card. It lets you continue your turn. Only costs 4. When you gain it, it goes back to where does it go all the way back to the start of the action phase? Yeah, but instead of giving you plus actions like Villa does, it gives you plus 2 cards and plus 1 buy. So if you have actions left over, you can still use them. If you don't, otherwise you can just use stuff that's useful in your buy phase. But drawing those 2 extra cards is so nice. It's like you get to your end of your turn and you need just a little bit more, so you buy Cavalry, and then you can continue with the cards that you draw. But the thing about it is that Cavalry is still good, even if you didn't care that much about continuing the turn. It gains 2 horses, which, like I've been saying with Slay and Paddock before it, that's a very nice effect. Okay, so it's not like playing it is bad. You're gaining 2 horses for your next shuffle, which is amazing. But still, you don't want to overlook just how good it is continuing your turn, right? There are just some crazy things you can pull off with this. You can gain it and get this effect, for instance. You can, like with a workshop or something like that. There are other things you can do with it, like empty the entire pile really fast by continuing to buy cavalries. There are times when that's worth it. And there's just so much to go in that I don't want to cover in an entire video, because I'd be going on for 20 minutes about this card. But suffice to say, it's incredibly versatile. You should buy it almost 100% of the time that it's in the kingdom. And I personally think it's the best card in the set. But there is another card that's quite good here, and that is Groom. So Groom does something that I didn't think was ever going to happen in Dominion until Menagerie came out. It makes rushes good again, because Groom, of course, is a gainer like Workshop. And I'm trying to pull up everything it does just so I can make sure I'm being accurate here. But I keep clicking on Goat Herd on accident. All right, there's Groom. Yeah, so Groom, you gain a 4-cost card, just like Workshop. If it's an action, you gain a horse. This is an incredibly good effect, okay? You want actions and you want horses, right? So you get both of them for 1. You gain a treasure, you gain a silver. This isn't great, but usually if you are loading up on treasures, you probably wanted more money, so it's not bad either. Finally, if you gain a victory card, you get plus card and plus action. And this is what makes Groom so dangerous, because in any game with Alt VP, suddenly you've got this totally spammable card that you can use to just pound that victory card all the way down. Yeah, there you go. Suddenly Gardens is good again with Groom, as well as any other victory card that you can get very cheaply. Even Estate, it's not half bad to just pile drive Estates with Groom in some games. It's obviously much worse than other victory cards. By the way, you have your dual type victory cards like Island and Great Hall. Great Hall's gone now, but Mill. Yeah, you get a horse and you get plus card plus action with those. So in games with those, Groom is absolutely bonkers, ridiculous, and it's still very strong just as a vanilla gainer, right? Because of that horse. Now, I think it's maybe being overrated a little bit. I would probably put it somewhere around here, maybe below Bounty Hunter. But, I don't disagree with it being in the S tier. I certainly think it belongs here. And you should definitely be thinking about it. Whenever I see it, I know we're probably getting Groom at some point in the game, because it's just that good of a gainer. Yeah, it made gainers good again, I guess. Not gainers, but rushes good again. And what can you say? That's something, considering how much the game had been moving toward engine play, that a card can just come along and do that. So that's not for nothing. We gotta put it up pretty high. Not sure if it's number 1, but it definitely deserves to be up there. Can't believe the guy married a horse. There you go. There's the tier list for Menagerie cards. Hope you enjoyed. Hope I didn't say anything completely wrong. These cards are still pretty new. See you for the next one.